Instructional designers, we do encounter some common problems in our design projects. And today I'm going to talk with Vic and Alyssa about these problems and go through our approaches to dealing with them and some tips for you if you encounter these problems. Let's listen in. Thank you so much for coming on today, Vic and Alyssa. I will just jump right into it. I know that we've all experienced different problems as IDs when working with the members of the design team, and just, with different experience levels and personalities and all of those sorts of things, sometimes things come up. So today I just want to talk to you a little bit about how you approach these issues when they do come up, and any tips or tricks that you have for other IDs who experience these problems. So the first question I have for you today: what do you do if your CLOs don't align with the course activities that you've created? And just a little preface for everyone, we usually set our course learning objectives before we dive into actually building out the content. So at this point, the objectives would be set, the content is built, but now you're realizing that they don't really align how you want them to. So any thoughts or tips on that type of situation?
Yeah, I can jump right in. So it depends on the situation, but for an example, certain CLOs are a little bit easier to tie into assignments, whereas others, if you get too far along, it's going to be more difficult. So an example that I can give is, because we're a Christian university, we often will tie in a Christian worldview CLO somewhere in the course. And that one can be an easier one that you can kind of tie into an assignment as you get farther on in the process. You can kind of add in those Christian questions. How does it relate to the topic? So if we forget and it's an easier CLO to tie in, I'll just figure out a way to make it flow. But if it doesn't tie in and we don't want to scrap it, the entire assignment, what I'll typically do is I'll go back and look at what we have in the modules document, which is like our weekly content and our discussions that we have. And if that CLO that, maybe we haven't tied in yet will fit somewhere else, I may just remove it from the assignment and tie it into the modules if it'll flow better. So it kind of just depends on the scenario.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alyssa, because CLOs are determinants for your entire course goals and objectives. So we need to find a way to modify our assignments or our modules, as you say. Maybe we can incorporate another activity within the assignments or the modules. How do I do that? Reassess the assignments, the modules, and I would also add in seek support from your team, all stakeholders, that including go back to the SME, discuss with them what you can add, what you should modify, and as well as speak with the rest of your stakeholders, such as the media designers. Is there a way we add an IM, for instance? And is this activity going to be easily built through the course when it's time to upload it into the LMS? So yeah, just reassess what it is, reassess, redevelop possibly the assignments, as well as don't forget to seek support from the stakeholders, especially your SME.
Yeah, those are all great points. And I think my biggest piece of advice is to communicate early. So as soon as, or just throughout the process, when you and your SME or whoever is working on the assignments, that's the first thing that you should be referring to. What CLOs are tied to this assignment? How are we going to assess them? Does it make sense the way that they're incorporated into this assignment? Can we actually assess that students have met this objective based on the instructions or requirements and all of those types of things? And if something has slip through the cracks a little bit, or it doesn't align exactly how you want to, definitely communicate and have that conversation with your design team to see if you can reframe it, or if you do need to incorporate this objective somewhere else, or just whatever the best plan is at that point. So that would be my piece of advice for that. And also try to find alignment between the objective, the assignment, the instructions, and the rubric. And I think when you find that really sweet spot of making sure that everything aligns and makes sense and just gels really well together, it's great. But since there's so many moving parts, it can be difficult to do that, and things can fall through the cracks or become misaligned pretty easily. So that would be my piece of advice as the ID. Just be hyper focused on the objectives and what's going on in the assignment. All right, I think we can jump to our next question here. What do you do if your SME isn't engaged in the process? And I know that can be kind of a difficult situation to be in, and it does depend on the situation and the SME, but do you have any tips as far as how you bring that up and what you would do as far as approaching the SME or trying to get them re-engaged?
So for me, what I typically will start to do is we use Google Apps for how we build our programs. So I will leave like a comment in one of our documents that's kind of like, hey, how are you? Do you need any assistance? And then wait for a response and go from there. But if I'm still not getting anything, then I might take it one step further and maybe find a resource that might fit in, or add in a discussion question, but leave it as a comment and say, hi, SME, how do you feel about this resource? Or what do you think about adding this question in? Just to try to get some engagement, and then go from there. So that's kind of my first step, is leave comments, see how I can help, and then just build on from there.
Yeah, that's so true, Alyssa. With the communication aspect of it, we need to make sure our SME and the entire team is on the same page. So I'll also, maybe if they respond best to email, or what we use is actually Slack, but if their preferred method is email, I'll send them a private chat or email just to see their side of things, just to listen on what's going on. Maybe they have something that's going on, whether it's workload or personal life. And then when I can know that their side of things, I'll do my best to offer also the support I can, whether find resources, see how I can help with assignment ideas, IM possibilities, and so forth. But yeah, I think the core of it comes back to communicate the entire time with your SME and the entire team involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with both of you. I think one of the more difficult parts of this type of situation is determining if your SME is disengaged or if your SME is confused, especially if it's somebody that you haven't worked with before. Because sometimes, these projects can be a lot, and we ask a lot of our SMEs as far as designing the content and coming up with these ideas. And as much as we do to support, sometimes it can be overwhelming, just asking them for all of this content and information. So I think that's definitely the first step, is determine if your SME is confused, or if something maybe wasn't communicated well enough as far as what you're asking them to do, and go from there. So I usually kind of do a mix of both of your approaches. I'll leave comments or Slack or email, depending on what the SME tends to respond best to, or just meet with them and go through any questions that they have and reset the expectations of, I really need you to complete XYZ, and kind of go from there and just see where they're at and how they're feeling.
Yeah. Every SME is different, and they all work so differently. So another example I can give is, I have a SME currently who she's working on all the documents, but she's new to our program. And we've been having just a little check-in meeting. So as we go through all our documents, we normally meet once a week, check in, and then we move on to our next steps. But I've been meeting with her just for like 5-10 minutes as a quick check-in a couple days before that meeting, just to make sure we're on the same page. So, and that's just because she is better being face-to-face and live, asking her questions rather than going through comments. So every SME is different, and I would just suggest being able to adapt and be flexible is just a really important part of this job.
Absolutely. Every SME is different, and that is one of our hats, adapting to their needs to best support them. So that's a really good approach, Alyssa. Vic, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's very similar to a situation where one of my SMEs, he's not well equipped with the technology we're using, such as Slack. So his preferred method was definitely email. So majority of our communication was through email, and with Google, he's not, again, like, it's a tool he's not familiar with. So his preference was Microsoft, whereas a little adapting on our team where he works best face to face. So we do the core of all our work face to face, and all the while the materials that need to be done offline, he will create them via Microsoft Office and email those to us, which works perfectly fine since we do have the engagement and the material and content. It's just done through a different means and tools used. So yeah, but that little hurdle we got through was, again, through building the relationship and rapport, and also listening and communicating to what the SME's needs and comforts are.
Absolutely. That can be so important and can make or break your design project. So that is a very important skill and approach. All right. So the next question is what to do if you are falling behind in a project. Do you have a specific way to kind of approach that, or I guess different steps that you would try to do to get back on track?
I think, as we can all probably agree on, is just overly communicate. That's kind of a trend in this conversation. So as you see things fall behind, communicate with everyone involved. And, there's not necessarily like a direct way to go to the next step when things are falling behind, because every course is going to be so different. But I just try to over communicate, and then I also give specific deadlines. So I can look at our dates and see what to do and say, okay, can you please have weeks 1 through 4 done by Sunday evening? So Monday I can come in, give you feedback, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I think by giving very specific deadlines and details, you can get through if things fall behind.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Vic, do you have a process that you go through for this type of situation?
For these situations, it just goes back to the communicate, as well as seek assistance where needed, whether it's from the immediate design team that for the course, as well as your extended team and your department. Because always seek assistance when you need it, or especially if you're falling behind as well.
Yeah, I totally, again, agree with both of you. Communicate, seek assistance. The only thing I would add is to try to figure out the cause of why you're falling behind. And, sometimes things just happen in the timeline that you can't avoid, and there isn't anything that you can do. But if there is something that you can actually help influence or take off someone's plate or whatever the situation is, then I think that also goes back to the adaptability. Like, just figure out what the issue is. If you can remedy it, do it. If you can't, over communicate and just make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as what needs to be done in what time frame. So that one's kind of a tough one, and sometimes there isn't a whole lot that you can do. All right. And I think now we are at our last question. What do you do if you don't have access to necessary resources? So this can be taken a few different ways. It can be resources as far as course content or resources that enable you to actually complete the design process. So however you want to approach that question, please feel free, but I'd love to hear how you would handle that problem.
So I don't know if I'm going to answer this 100% the way that it's asked, but what came to my mind was sometimes we have resources that maybe are in like a certain database that we don't have access to or students don't have access to. So I will either ask the SME for additional resources, or if I have the general topic that they want covered, but I don't have access to it, I might just go do some further research on my own in our library or different databases that we have access to, and then provide them to the SME and just explain to them that here's some resources that students will be able to easily access. Do any of them cover the topic that you need? So kind of just do my own research if I know what the SME is looking for, but if not, just communicate with the SME and see if they can provide additional resources.
That's a great point. I had a similar situation where the SME found great resources for students to use, but it was in a database that we didn't have a subscription to. So what ended up happening is he got a print PDF, but it took a while because we also had to go back to the author, the original author of the resource to get their permission. So with all that, but since knowing that we don't have access to that specific resource, we went back and worked with our team to create IMs, interactive media guides for our students based on the content from other resources. That way, the students can have the necessary access without all the hurdles.
Yeah, I think that those are both great approaches. Doing your own research or looking for ways to integrate different types of media. I think those are great approaches. And then also, like you both mentioned, work with your SME and see if there are alternatives that you can find or create, or if there are maybe multiple things that you can use to achieve the same outcome that the SME was hoping for. I think that that's a really helpful way to go around it as well. I think the biggest thing I'm hearing is just be proactive as you are reviewing the resources that the SME gives you or that you find as well, and ensuring that students do have access, because I know that's a major priority of ours as well. So I think that brings us to the end of our questions, but do you have any tips or tricks or any other problems that you think are, I guess, prevalent in the instructional design field? That's okay if you don't. All right, well, we can go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. I do want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, which is the Master of Science in Instructional Design and Technology program that we have here. If you'd like more information, you can go ahead and scan that QR code or give us an email at msidt@lapu.edu. In this program, you definitely learn more about just being an instructional designer and the different things that you will encounter and how to approach them. So if you'd like to learn more, definitely check us out. Thank you, Alyssa and Vic, for coming on and sharing your experience and wisdom with us all. And we will see you all next time. This is what learning feels like.